Hello and welcome to week 2 in our class in clinical psychology. So this week we are going to talk about chapter 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to learn about cultural issues in psychology, which is the first area. And I've got a little graph here which talks about cultural knowledge and cultural skills, as well as cultural awareness and cultural competence. So these are some areas that we read about in our chapter. And of course, this is like super important because our cultural competence and understanding of our clients helps us then build that therapeutic relationships, because we need to cross that bridge towards the therapy client rather than expecting them to cross the bridge to our culture. And there's always cultural differences. I think about working with teenage boys that are of African American in my past, and tuning into their world was a lot easier if I knew their families, if I knew something about their community, if I could maybe convince them to share some of their social media with me. So our clinical skills really depend on our cultural competence. So that in the discussion you get to do I think it's an interesting task. You develop a mock training for cultural competence. So I think that's really kind of cool. So the second chapter, or chapter 5 here, deals with some of the ethical principles, and particularly confidentiality, informed consent, boundaries in multiple relationships, and competencies. And hopefully we're all going to be competent based on our education. But I have to tell you that I do run into people who have sort of like outside relationships with their clients. And I think that often, if that happens, that has something to do with a failed countertransference. When our clients come to us, they transfer onto us the issues that they may have, like if it's mother issues, for me now at my age, the grandparent issues, or whatever issues they have, and they bring them to us and they project them. And when we become then that person that is not just the therapist and working in the clinical relationship, but we take that on and fall into what's called a countertransference, where we become the person that they are projecting upon. I think that's sort of like the stepping stone into unboundaried relationships. And you have to keep in mind that the relationship in the clinical experience is all about the client's needs, right? And that's not a realistic expectation for a relationship outside of the clinical setting, because then, a true relationship is about both people's needs. And so that creates unrealistic expectations, and it's not a good idea. And so it's unethical. So what you get to do is you get to pick out 2 of these principles, which is confidentiality, informed consent, boundaries in multiple relationships, as well as competence, and write about them for your first written assignment this week. Finally, the last area that you're going to learn about, and that's chapter 6, and you will actually get a chance to summarize 2 experimental designs. There is research. What kind of research do we do as clinical psychologists? And there's like the research about like how well do different therapies work in an experimental setting, and that's called efficacy. And then the question is, how well do therapeutic interventions work in the actual real life clinical setting? And that is called effectiveness. And that, of course, has more to do also with the clinical competence and how well we create these relationships and with our clients, right? And so we get actually a pretty good overview in this chapter of what you learn in much greater detail in the research methods class. So I think this is a good little overview, and you'll be able to summarize 2 of those experimental designs. As always, let me know if you have any questions this week, and I'm always available, and let me hope that you have good success this week.